Well, I'm back with you once again, your brother from Harlem with the high school education. I want to tell you I spoke about him a little briefly in one of my earlier segments, but this was a pimp player that I knew personally. See, a lot of these pimps and players I didn't really know personally. I met most of them through Ori back in the day. But this guy I met earlier. I met him as a teenager when he came up to see us. Well, he came up to hang out with us for the summer. He in turn had a cousin that lived in our block named Maxine. And she had come up to us one day. We were sitting on the stoop, hanging out like all young brothers do. And she said, "Look, I got a cousin coming up from Florida. He's coming up from Pensacola, Florida. And he doesn't know that much about what goes on in Harlem, but he wants to learn." He said, "I don't want y'all taking advantage of him." Well, we did take a little advantage of him because he was a country boy. So I met him again later in life when he was bona fide pimp, bona fide player. How he got there, I'll touch a little on that, but he was a nice guy. But he became eventually a big-time pimp in the pimping game. And like I said, when he first came up to see us one summer, during the summer when we were teenagers, we just hung out on the stoop, played bid whist, drank a little wine, and just hung out and just did things. Well, Julius came up to us, country boy, high water pants, or floods as some of the younger kids call it now. We call them high waters back in there. Had a gold tooth in his mouth. He was tall. So it kind of set him apart from everybody else. When I say tall, he was about 6'2" or so. And everybody in my group was 6 feet and under. So he stood out. And he had a birthmark on his face. So he had a black mole. I can't remember whether it was here. I think it was down there, but it was a black mole. It was a birthmark. And it was distinguishing to see it because nobody had a birthmark that could be visible like that. But he had one. He came up and we kind of taught him a little Harlem shuffle, how to hang out. And we taught him how to talk smooth and all of this. And he had money. So he was our bank. If we needed something, we go to Julius. And later on, he told me he learned how to hustle. He was doing a little hustle down here in Pensacola, but we kind of refined that a little. He got a little slicker hanging out in Harlem back in the day when Harlem was Harlem, right? So when he resurfaced in my life and he came back, now all of a sudden, he got him a Cadillac Fleetwood and a stable of women. And he loved black in those days, so he always wore black. He had a black outfit, and in those days we made 3 pieces. We called them, he made him a suit, a top coat to match, and he had him a black cane that he wore with a pearl handle on it, and he bebopped around. He was a player. And when I told all the brothers that hung out in my group that he had resurfaced with me, they were amazed, especially when I told them he was a big-time pimp. But, like I say, the pimping game in those days, it was a business. All these hustlers and street people that I talk about, to them, it was a business. We look at it and we say, "Oh, what they're doing is wrong." Well, yes, it is. But I never got into any of the illegal things that happened during those days. I just knew them because I worked for them. My business was to service them making clothes. And that's mainly what I did. Hung out with them, yes. But my business was mainly to make clothes for them, to provide them with the look and the outfit and the wardrobe, that they wanted because they would stand in the mirror and they would look at themselves and be cool. Well, Julius was like that too. He wasn't any different. It's just that here's a guy that I knew as a teenager. By now, we're in our early 20s. I think when Julius came back into my life, I was about 23, 24 years old. So he was the same age, because we were like the same age. But I was living a different life than he was. So I look at the life he led compared to the life I led. Now, the amount of pimps and players that I know, that's endless, the amount that I know. It's endless, the amount of players that I knew. But I'll say this. Life in Harlem in those days, everything was about a hustle. Somebody hustled something or someone. And it was always, and the money was always turning over. And when I first met Julius came to us back in those days. I would say this was somewhere around the late 50s when he first came to us. And he had what we would call a pocket full of money when he came to Harlem from Pensacola as a teenager. And what we call a pocket full, if you had $100, we call that a pocket full of money. And when he came up, he had almost $400 that he had worked the summers and the summers to save to come to New York. So he had a pocket full of money. Now when he came back to me as an adult, a player, he had a knot. Now knot is what we call back then, because all players wrap their money, everybody, you put a rubber band around your money because the little old money clip didn't hold any money. So they use rubber bands. Because when you got that much money, we call, you know, the old saying, a fistful of dollars, oh, trust me, it was a fist. Now, at that rate now, that little $300 or $400 that he had when he was a teenager, now he would have $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. And like I said, all players carried their bankroll with them. He had one too, with a rubber band wrapped around it there. But this was our boy, Julius Bryant. I don't know where Julius Bryant is today, if he's still alive. I just don't know, because I hadn't seen him since the 60s. And to know a guy and to see a guy grow from here to there, I could say, almost say right in front of your eyes, because when I knew him, he was this way. And when he came back into my life, he was that way. But deep down, I had a lot of conversations with Julius. He was just another brother. Just another brother. Making the living that he chose to make, how he chose to make it. Like I say, I never get into what they do or how they got into it. I just look at it and I'm thankful. I'm just thankful a lot of times that a lot of these people just came into my life to give me an experience and a know-how and to ask questions about how they did it. So, brother from Harlem, once again, bidding you a farewell and blessings to you. Come back to you with some different types of stories next. I don't want to dwell on all the bad guys that I knew. I don't want to talk about, because all of their lives were parallel. So I don't want to talk about that. So I want to talk about the changing scenes of 125th Street now. Now as we get into the latest 60s, how some things changed and what was happening and how the world looked at Harlem. It was kind of negative, but it wasn't bad because, like I said before, all of New York was like that. They just singled out Harlem and they put a stamp on it. And it's a shame. It's a shame that they put that stamp on it. So once again, the brother from Harlem bidding you a farewell. I'll be back.